So Dragon's Dogma 2 is only just around the corner. It comes out exactly a week from today. And as I always like to do on this channel in the lead up to the launch of any game that we're covering, today I'm going to be breaking down everything you could possibly need to know about Dragon's Dogma 2. Now, starting off with the basic boring stuff just to get it out of the way. Like I said, the game is launching in a week from today on March 22nd. It is going to be launching on all next-gen consoles, that being the PS5, the Xbox Series consoles, as well as PC. Unfortunately, it won't be available on the PS4 or the Xbox One. It is just simply too big of a game to be able to work on those platforms. Now, there are also two different editions of the game, those being the standard edition and the deluxe edition. I do have a full video breaking down each edition, so check that out for like the full descriptions of everything. But just to quickly summarize the difference between those editions, the standard edition is $70. This is just the game on its own, plus if you do pre-order it, you'll get an extra weapon for each of the 4 starting classes in the game, otherwise known as vocations. As for the deluxe edition, this one comes in at $80. It's only $10 more than the base edition or the standard edition. And this actually comes with 9 additional items compared to that standard edition, these being the Explorer's Camping Kit, 1500 Rift Crystals, Dragon's Dogma 1 Music and Sound Collection. You'll then also get a Wake Stone, the Art of Metamorphosis book, a Harpy Snare Smoke Beacon, the Ambivalent Rift Incense, a Heartfelt Pendant, and a makeshift jail key. On top of that too, the deluxe edition will also come with those same weapons as the standard edition if you do pre-order it, but you'll also get the Ring of Assurance on top of that as well, so it's actually an extra pre-order bonus for the deluxe edition as well. Now, moving on to the setting and the story and just the map in general. As you would expect, I've not really said too much about the story side of things just to kind of avoid spoiling it for us. What they have said though is that you do not have to have played Dragon's Dogma 1, which came out in 2012. This game has completely different story and character elements to it. It is set in essentially the same universe, but there is almost nothing in this game that is from the first game. There'll be little nods to it and stuff like that, but if you've never played that game, that does not matter. This game is still very much for you. Now, the game is set in a realm with 2 different regions or nations, those being the Vermund region and the Batal region. Vermund is the kingdom of humans. It is set in a mostly lush sort of green landscape with plenty of different castles and stuff like that, and just generally some very exciting landmarks. There is then the Batal region as well, known as the Land of the Beastren, a rugged canyon nation which has a big city on it that is built on the site of some ancient ruins, which definitely sounds very awesome to me. Now, this is, like I said, home to the Beastren, otherwise known as the sort of cat-human hybrids. If you guys played Skyrim, they do look very similar to the Khajiit from Skyrim, and this is essentially where they live. Now, in terms of the size of the map, they've confirmed it is about 4 times larger than the original Dragon's Dogma map, which, for context, speaking of Skyrim once again, means that the Dragon's Dogma 2 map should be roughly twice the size of the Skyrim map, because the original Dragon's Dogma map was roughly half the size of the Skyrim map. So the map size seems like it is going to be pretty damn solid, and from what we've seen of it, it looks like there is plenty of cool little locations to explore in addition to the open plains and the rolling mountains and all that kind of thing. On top of that as well, there is also a day and night system. They've said that it is really dangerous at night. There's actually a bunch of enemies who only come out at night, so it's almost going to be completely different playing the game at nighttime compared to playing it at daytime. And it's also like completely pitch black at night. You do have to have a torch with you, otherwise you essentially cannot see anything in front of you unless there is just natural lighting on the map and stuff like that. But if you're wandering out in a field, there is going to be no lighting, and therefore you literally cannot see unless you bring some sort of torch with you, which you're definitely going to want to do because, like I said, it is more dangerous at night. There are actually some really difficult enemies wandering around at nighttime. Now, before we go any further, if you guys are new to the channel and you are interested in more Dragon's Dogma 2 content, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. There is plenty more content on the way. We're doing daily content in the lead up to launch, and there's already plenty of stuff that I've covered, as well as obviously plenty more once the game actually launches, so make sure you don't miss out. Now, moving on, we have one of the most interesting points of the game. This is the class system known as the vocations. Now, I do have a full breakdown of every single vocation, so be sure to check that out for every single detail there currently is on the internet, but I'll kind of just quickly summarize the key points here to kind of save a bit of time in the video. Now, there are 4 starting classes to choose from with 10 total classes in the game. Like I said, the classes are called vocations in this game, and the 4 starting vocations are known as the fighter, the archer, the thief, and the mage. damage. Now the fighter is a sword and shield wielding vocation. This is best at the sort of close quarters melee type of combat with the ability to deal solid damage but also protect themselves with their shield. The archer is pretty self-explanatory. You have a bow and arrow and are best suited to ranged attacks, being able to use different types of arrows such as explosive arrows and even firing more than one arrow at a time. The thief is a dual wielding dagger vocation with insane agility, quick attack speeds and a much faster paced playstyle compared to the other classes. You can also pickpocket from enemies and stuff like that with this class too. Lastly, we have the mage, which is kind of self-explanatory as well. They wield a staff and they deal ranged magic damage, as well as being able to heal your pawns, provide support in the form of buffs, and overall this is just a very support-based vocation. There are then the final 6 vocations, and I'm not going to go into every single detail because again it will take so much time. There is a full video on that already, but these are known as the warrior, the sorcerer, the magic archer, the mystic spearhand, the trickster, and lastly the warfarer. Now all of these are essentially like advanced, almost mixed and matched versions of the base 4 that I just mentioned. That doesn't necessarily mean that these are better, they are just a little bit more specific compared to those first 4 being a little bit broader. For example, the warrior is essentially the same as the fighter, but uses two-handed greatswords instead of a sword and a shield, and so on and so forth for all of the other vocations as well. Now something very important to know too is that you can respec or change vocation at any time by heading to a vocation guild around the map. So it's important to know we are not locked in once we choose any of these vocations. We can change pretty much at any point throughout the game. Now on top of the vocation system, there's also then the pawn system. Just like in Dragon's Dogma 1, this game has a pawn system which is essentially almost like a companion system where these companions will follow you around on your journey. Now you can actually create your very own main pawn, so you can create not only your own character but that pawn as well, and then you can hire up to 2 other pawns to come along with you on your journey. Now your created pawns can actually be used by other players as well in an online format. So the game is single player and can be played fully offline, but for example, you guys could actually hire the pawn that I create and they can come along with you on your journey, which is a really cool way to kind of implement the community into a single player game like this, almost making it feel as though it is a little bit multiplayer, even though it essentially isn't. It is completely a single player game. Now don't worry if you play offline. Like I said, this game can be played fully offline. There are just pre-made pawns that can still be hired throughout the world too, so you're not going to miss out on anything if you can't connect to the internet or anything like that. The only difference will be, instead of being able to, like I said, use my pawn, you can just use one of the pre-made pawns that have been made by the developers. Now the pawns have a really intelligent AI system that means they actually learn from you and change their playstyle over time. Now an example I heard of this is that if you're a bit panicky early in the game, for example, and you are just constantly spamming healing potions, your pawn or even multiple different pawns might actually learn that as a trait and then constantly spam those potions themselves, even if they maybe don't need to, meaning they'll constantly be full on HP, which is obviously a good thing for you, not having to revive them all the time, but it will also mean they will run out of resources quicker, and that is just one example of how this can work. So the pawns that you hire, they will essentially look at you as their leader and they will learn off you. The way that you play directly impacts how your pawns actually play as well. Now something about this game is that there is not really many quest markers at all in the game, but sometimes depending on what the quest is and stuff like that, and depending on the pawns that you have, your pawns may actually know the way to, you know, the end of that quest depending on what that quest is, and you can essentially just follow your pawn along, leading you to the end of that quest. So they are much more helpful than just being there in combat. They can actually bring you along on the journey and help you get to those quests when maybe you would be lost otherwise. You can even see in this clip where the player falls to what would obviously be their death. They've fallen from like freaking 50 meters in the air, and their pawn actually catches that character and saves his life. So these are much more useful than just being there in combat. They are genuine companions that can follow you around, and it seems as though the AI of these pawns is way more advanced than essentially anything that I've ever seen for any other companions in pretty much any other open world RPG that I've ever played. Now that's enough about you and your teammates or your pawns. Getting onto the enemy side of things, one of the main elements to any fantasy RPG is obviously the enemy types. Now I've got a full video soon that is going to be breaking down every single enemy that we have seen so far in the game. But for, I guess, a quick summary of what you can expect in this game, there are some regular sized enemies, for example, wolves and goblins and stuff like that. There are also some much larger beasts out there like dragons and like huge trolls who will actually be guarding a chest and stuff like that. And there's even some crazy bosses like this Talos, who is some sort of insane titan type of enemy, and he looks absolutely enormous. He looks like 3 times as big as any of the dragons. So we've kind of got everything from regular sized enemies who are potentially even smaller than you as a player, up to people who are about the size of 50 human beings standing on top of each other. On top of that as well, there is plenty of side content you guys can expect in this game. The devs seem to be really pushing how much side content there is. One thing to know about that though is that there is a lack of quest markers, like I said before, which some people might love, some people might absolutely hate. For me personally, I'm actually really fine with that because that's how it was in Elden Ring, and that is one of my favorite games of all time. So provided they do it properly, I think it can still be really solid having no quest markers. It kind of makes you feel a bit more immersed in the world, and it kind of leads you to have to find a bunch of stuff on your own. Or if you get completely lost, you can come back and watch YouTubers like myself that will help explain any of the stuff that is a little bit more confusing. Now, how we actually get this side content and the quests and stuff like that is that sometimes quests come through going and speaking to an NPC yourself. Sometimes they will come up to you though, a lot like, for example, a lot of the Bethesda games, Fallout and Skyrim and stuff like that, where you'll just be wandering around minding your own business and someone will actually chase you down and provide you with a quest. So there's plenty of different ways we can get quests in this game, and it does seem like it is trying to be as immersive as possible. It seems to me like there is going to be well over 100+ hours of content to cover in this game. So for me personally, that is very exciting. It can be a little bit overwhelming too, but I think at the end of the day, that is kind of what we'll want in a big open world RPG like this. And I cannot wait to get stuck into that side content. Now, there are also a couple of downsides that I couldn't make a video talking about everything you need to know and leave out some of the downsides to the game. The first one, which is going to be a big one for a lot of people, is that the game is going to be running at roughly 30 frames per second, but it's actually uncapped and it targets 60 frames per second according to the developers. Now, that probably sounds better than just being at 30 frames per second, but what happens when a frame rate is uncapped is it can often lead to the game feeling more choppy than if it was just running at 30 frames per second. What this might mean is that you're just wandering through a field and you're getting close to 60 frames per second and the game feels nice and smooth. Then all of a sudden you come across a boss out of absolutely nowhere, and let's just say it's like a dragon or something where they're breathing fire and there's just a lot going on. That can then make the game drop all the way down to, roughly 30 frames per second, potentially even lower than that. And it can make that game feel very, very choppy and just kind of feel as though there are performance issues, even though the devs have kind of made it that way on purpose. So it technically isn't performance issues, but it will definitely feel like it for us as the players. For me personally, I'm fine with 30 FPS. I obviously prefer 60 FPS, and I think everyone probably does. But when it is uncapped, that is actually a little bit of a concern that it's going to feel really choppy. So I thought I would let you guys know about that. Hopefully they change it and just lock it to 30 frames per second at least, then it will feel very smooth, even at 30 FPS. But the way that it is, it could definitely feel a little bit choppy until they make some changes. Another issue is that there is only one save file. This is something that was in the first game as well, and a lot of people had a lot of issues with that. I think they've done this to essentially prevent too many pawns being in their servers, because obviously if you made 100 different save files, then you can make 100 different pawns. And if everyone does that, then there is 100 pawns between every single player, and their servers would just be kind of overloaded with too much data, and that would ultimately be very costly to Capcom. So I think that's why they've done this, but that is something else to just keep in mind. There's only one save file. So if you guys want to start and get 20 hours in and then you want to restart for whatever reason, well, you can't do that unless you delete your current save file, and that is definitely a little bit concerning. Now, moving on to, I guess, the previews and what people have said about the game who have already played it. People seem to be very, very high on this game from those early previews. One that I read from VG247 wrote, "After only 3 hours of gameplay, I'm convinced it's not just a Game of the Year contender, it may be an all-time great." I've seen so many other reviews and stuff that have said pretty similar things to what that review said, or preview I should say. I saw people comparing it to Elden Ring and Breath of the Wild in terms of of how confident it made them feel that it's going to be a good game. So it definitely sounds like people are very confident that this will be a banger. I've pretty much heard nothing bad about it at all, other than, like I said, the save file thing and the uncapped frame rate. Those are essentially the two negatives I've heard about this game. Everything else is people saying this is probably, you know, the number one contender so far for Game of the Year. And not only that, it could be genuinely an all-time great. So people are very, very high on it, and that is no different for me. I think this is potentially going to be one of my top 25 or so games of all time if it lives up to what people are saying and what all of the gameplay looks like and stuff like that. But anyway, that is everything you need to know about Dragon's Dogma 2 leading up to launch. As I said, there is plenty of other content, more, I guess, in-depth content as well, that is on the channel already. And in the days and weeks leading up to launch, there is plenty more to come as well. So if you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe with those notifications on so you don't miss out on any more Dragon's Dogma 2 content. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all in the next one.